So in this first part of the session, we've really focused on unpacking what the impact has been to the utilities, and we've heard from many of our colleagues on what they've been doing to address the reduction in both revenues, but also I should also add that we helped redefine the problem a little bit better. The biggest problem, obviously, isn't the reduction in revenue. We are seeing a reduction from businesses as they keep staff at home, but largely that's been offset by an increase in usage for residential users, with all of us working from home. I'm making an assumption there. Not just working from home, but due to large layoffs and high rates of unemployment, lots of people are home as well. So we need to differentiate between revenue and cost recovery or collection, revenue collection, and the likelihood of uncollectible or unresolved debt. So speaking to that, looking forward in this next session, what I want us to focus on is further looking into mitigation for these cost issues, the cash flow issues and constraints. Use some imaginative examples, and also let's aggressively strike down anything that doesn't work or isn't feasible. And I encourage our panelists to be critical at this point. We're all adults. We can handle criticism, or we can debate ideas. So I really want to encourage that. And as we move towards wrapping up, towards the end of this discussion, we'll start talking about longer term. No, scratch that. We'll talk about what can we do for immediate effect. Many of the people in attendance today represent utilities, whether they're directly involved in their management or they're consultants for, or they come from development organizations that are trying to assist. And there I want to talk to what can we do today, tomorrow, next week, next month. And if this is going to be with us until 2022, what are we going to do for the next year, 18 months, to make sure our utilities can continue to deliver services? So right now, I want to talk to some of the things that Kelvin threw out there, and as well as Ava's brought up, and what everybody's talked about: soft issues, communications, engaging with our customer base, and what does that mean? What does that look like? It's one thing to say to reach out and talk to them, but what are we saying? What are we expecting them to respond with? And are we listening to them? So is it a two-way conversation? We've touched on technology, ease of payment, online systems, the like. To what extent are those practical to people that don't have those in place already? Is that a short-term priority investment? The idea of debt holidays and restructuring our financial our debt with and both the customer debt as well as our own balance sheets. And then finally, the idea of going after low-hanging fruit. Physical losses have been dismissed a little bit, but looking through the questions that I've received from audience, it's coming up again and again. So I would want to address to think through that as well as what we can do about reducing commercial losses. John, we haven't heard from you in a little bit. Can we hear some examples of what U.S. utilities are doing to address that cash crunch?
Sure. Yeah. From what you've heard already, the impact in the U.S. isn't as massive as it is in some other countries, but certainly business continuity is a big topic today with U.S. utilities, and ensuring that the the service continues, that customers can reach utilities representatives and get questions answered and things like that. And so the communications around utility service during COVID has been very much heightened in the U.S. with a lot more outreach to customers on the quality of water service and the limited risk that water poses in terms of transmitting the virus and things like that, to continue to gain confidence, have customers gain confidence in the water system. In terms of some echoing some additional reactions to the declines in revenues, U.S. utilities are looking at non-essential operating expense curtailment, not filling positions that are open, and other things like that to mitigate expenditure. But on the capital side, there's also some pretty widespread consideration for reduction of capital spending. And in the U.S., with a lot of very old water and wastewater systems, we have, going into COVID, we've had an issue with the renewal. The rate of renewal of infrastructure has been an issue. It's lagged what is really needed, and so we've, over the past several, let's say 10 years, we've made some real good gains in the U.S. on attacking that aging infrastructure issue. But now what we're seeing, at least this year, is kind of a step back from that because of the declines in revenues. And so we're seeing deferred capital expenditures. I think the June survey that I mentioned from the American Water Works Association identified that nearly half of the utilities in the U.S. have either implemented capital project deferments or we're considering that. And so that's just a short-term reaction to the decline in revenues and collections. But what we've done as part of our research was to show that that decline in capital spending has a ripple effect throughout the economy and actually makes the economic situation worse. So for every U.S. dollar that's spent on infrastructure in the U.S., the local economy benefits about sixfold due to the ripple effects of that on the economy. And so it results in job creation. It results in additional economic activity. And so with capital spending being curtailed, it adds to the job loss. It adds to the economic downturn, and then that tends to be a circular effect. And so I don't think capital spending curtailment is a great solution to the problem. Certainly, prioritizing capital needs and focusing on the most critical capital projects is important, and maybe there are some discretionary ones that could be curtailed, but it's still problematic to do that, in my opinion.
Thanks for that, John.
Yes,
I see William coming on here, and glad you're coming on. I want to hear your experience contrasting with U.S. utilities, which have only seen a small drop and presumably have pretty strong cash reserve to withstand that, at least in the medium term. In terms of the African utilities that we're dealing with, that may have been struggling or had cash flow constraints leading into this, and have seen drop-offs towards zero collection rates, what is that impact looking like, and how are we addressing that?
Chris?
Yeah.
Can I come in?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I was looking through the questions, and I found some very, very interesting questions, which maybe if you allow me, I could comment on them. One is from Leo, the issue of the costs versus the revenues. And then the other one is from Mercy about staff productivity. And then from anonymous attendee about the issue whether there is now discussion. Maybe let me provoke you by saying that this pandemic has been a blessing in disguise, especially for us who are now looking at utilities, reforming utilities, and starting with my own company. I realized that, we can save a lot of money. We no longer need to go to the offices. We save rent. We save transport costs. We save so many allowances. And when I was talking to one of the utilities, they told me that this is the time that in actual fact they have realized that they have been employing deadwood, because almost 3/4 of the staff were at home and operations were going on normally. So how do you account for that? That people are still getting water, and they're getting it even more efficiently than when all the staff were down there in the offices. So this is the time, I think, to sit back and reduce your staff, reduce your costs. Okay, maybe it sounds a bit dramatic when you say reducing staff, but I'm saying at least providing the staff productivity that you need per 1,000 connections. Because we realized, I think in the 3 or 4 utilities, the staff were doing, the few staff that remained behind, actually 1/4 of the staff were doing a fantastic job, more than when the entire population of the staff were there. So those who were politically connected were at home, they were enjoying their whatever it is. Those who were socially connected were at home, but the workers were really seen on the front and they were working. So I think in terms of costs, some utilities have been able to reduce the costs tremendously, and they have been able to see the light that in actual fact they have been employing deadwood. Of course, on the other hand, revenues have gone down. I mean, that's something that we can also look at, because again of the public policy where they were saying no disconnection, and make sure you provide as much water as you possibly can. You don't disconnect them. But in spite of that, 1 or 2 utilities told me that because of what Kevin has been talking about, the motivation of the staff, engaging the customers, still these utilities have managed to collect the money that they would need. So I wanted to talk about that so we can allow the next panelist.
Yeah, thank you, William. It's the old adage of never waste a good crisis. So thanks for that. Anybody want to jump in on this one? I think this is a very key discussion. Let's talk about staffing. Is anybody looking to reduce? And William, we need you to come consult for Eskom and South African Airways. We can trim some dead weight here. Kelvin, are you seeing similar things?
I could come in. I think the guidance that was given for the utilities in Zambia is that look at the essential workers that need to report. So those basically work when they report, they produce when they report. Then there are some people that can still work from home. So for them, they could produce whilst they are at home. As long as they've got an internet connection. For example, approvals, exchanging memos, making decisions, that can be done from home. But obviously, when you look at it, there's certain costs that you need to be looking for. For example, if your fuel cost goes up in this time of COVID, then there is something wrong that is happening. If, for example, your cost of connectivity goes down, then again you might be worried, because what we've seen is that a number of people that are working from home would need a connection, and so obviously that cost goes up. So for me, what people should focus on is every cost that they need to meet. They should ask themselves, why am I spending on this particular cost? Okay, so depending on the answer there, then you'll be able to say, okay, maybe I don't need to spend, because I think we are in a new normal, so to say. So every expenditure should be analyzed. And as Moira has already mentioned, I think you can discover that you will be able to reduce on some of the costs. There are some costs of traveling, for example. Okay. There was a time when we said, look, you can't just travel even out of town. And if you see that the travel cost is going up, then I think we need to be worried. Why is it going up? So I think someone should be having a tap on every cost and justifying why they need to spend. Let me also make a comment on when you had said, what are we doing? What exactly do we mean in terms of engaging customers? What exactly should happen? I think what we've seen, or the bottom line should be, what impression should the customer have each time they hear the name of the utility? If there is some frustration, then definitely you have a problem, even in collecting, because no one is willing to pay when they are frustrated. So what we need to create is emotions that attach someone to the utility. For example, if each time I hear a utility's name, I see the importance of water and how I need to support these utilities to be able to provide water continuously, then it becomes easy for me to pay. So how do you create that kind of emotion? There are a lot of platforms that we can use now. For example, if I'm sending messages and I'm telling people, can you report any complaints? And when a complaint is reported, it's frustrating because the utility is not responding to that complaint. Then it becomes difficult for me, to be motivated to pay. So these are some of the softer issues I'm talking about that needs to be addressed. One of the utilities has said, look, we won't come and read your meter. What you do is take a picture of that meter and send it to us. That creates confidence that, look, these people are getting what I've read, and so possibly my consumption is the actual. So again, those are some of the softer issues. The bottom line is, let's create emotions that allows the customer to see the value of receiving this service, and they will be compelled, to pay for the service. The importance of water to manage COVID, I think, cannot be overemphasized. So what messages are we giving to everyone out there about the importance of water flowing and the importance that we need customers, government to be able to, support the flow of water? Again, you design different messages that should be able to go. So not only customers need to hear that, the government needs to know, the people in the health sector need to know so that they're able to support. One of the things that we've seen is that we have a platform where we interact with the health ministry, and they've realized the needs for water to flow. And you'd see their support as well when we present some of the issues to government that, look, can you assist these utilities? You see them supporting. So I think those are some of the softer issues we need to create. Unfortunately for Zambia, I think with the presence of the regulators, we've been able to coordinate such kind of interaction.
Thanks, Kelvin. That is fantastic. We've got a... Yeah, please, Ava, come through.
Okay. First of all, I want to say that I totally agree with what Kelvin was saying. I think communication is extremely important, and also to create all these awareness campaigns to the population, how important water is and how important is that if they can pay, they pay for the service. Of course, we have to allow them to pay and to receive their bills and all that. And that's why, for us, for instance, on these concessions in Colombia, the first thing that we implemented was the call center, because we wanted to have this communication with the population. But I think something that is also very important is to have all the stakeholders involved on the crisis that we have right now. For instance, in one of some of the municipalities, they have a big problem of water scarcity. So we made an agreement with some bulk water providers to get more water, so everybody could, we could provide a good service to them. So we didn't have to say, no, you have only this percentage of water on your tap. You can get as much as you need. So I think providing a good service is very important for the population to be aware of how water utilities are important for them as well. And there was one thing that William mentioned before. It was about investment. And I totally agree that now is the time for the public utilities to do investment, but also I think it's the right time for all the private utilities to do investment. I think it's very important. Water is a very valuable resource. So in general, the water systems are not perfect. There are lots of water losses, and the sooner we tackle that problem and we make investment to have a better networks, the less water we are going to be missing. And so at the end, it's like we are reducing the loss of revenues as well by reducing the loss of water. So I think investment is very important, even more for private utilities, because now also we have to, all of us, we have to be committed to this crisis. We have to be involved. And if we have the resources, if we have the financial resources to invest, why not? And I can say that we have not stopped our investments on our utilities. What we have done is to rearrange them. We have to change all the planning that we had before. We have to start from the beginning, because, of course, there are many things that we were not allowed to do during the lockdown. And even today is difficult because you cannot enter the homes of the people. For instance, we had some smart metering projects, and we had to stop them because we were not allowed to enter into the installations of the homes and houses. But there are many other things that you can do on open spaces. Like repairing pipes, introducing new sensors along the pipeline systems, all of that will help you for a better management, for a better service at the end, and you can still do them. So all those, we have reorganized, rescheduled all the capital investment plans that we had, but we have not stopped them. And I think it's very important to keep on investing on the water systems, because now with this crisis, we have seen how important water is. But the reality is that water is one of the most important things that we have, and we have to really take care of it.
Agreed. One of the questions just come through from Richard North, and I'm going to use it because it fits directly into what the next question I wanted to ask is, what are national governments doing to keep their utilities and other water service providers financially afloat during the pandemic? We've only got one national government representative on the table, so we can definitely pick on Cezanne a little bit here. But I'm going to expand that question to allow a larger group to participate and ask, what would we like national governments to be doing? Cezanne, do you want to kick us off here?
Yeah. Government in broad, I think they're doing a lot to assist in this pandemic. I know that National Treasury has reprioritized some funding, of which is aimed to support municipalities in expanding the service. And from our department, there has been a drive to assist in providing water tanks in some areas where there is poor access to water, and there is tankering system that goes there to fill up those tanks. Now, moving forward, we also have to look at how we formalize and stabilize that supply currently, because it's investment that is being made from all the savings in other areas, or the non-spent in other areas that goes into this area. So there is a serious drive of avoiding to just dump these tanks with municipalities over time, but to work with them in an effort of making sure that this would end up being a formal supply in the long run, meaning that they will have to be connected within the system and not just keep these water tankers running up and down. Now, I wanted to link that with the previous comment of saying that the costs are not increasing within the utilities at this time. As much as people are sitting at home not working, we are seeing these other costs that are rising currently. For example, this tankering. Even if it may not be coming from the pocket of the municipality, somewhere along the chain of government, that is being paid for, and it has to be accounted for. So there are added costs in terms of the network connections for those that are working from home. And we feel that, or I see that this is going to become the increase in service provision will have to be maintained over time, because we can't say after COVID, then we drop the people down and say you can't get water anymore. So for us to maintain that, again, the investment is going to remain up for a little while longer. Thanks.
Chris, may I go then after that one?
Please, Johan, love to hear your response.
Thank you very much. I think the experience from the municipality side is slightly different to what Sizani has just given us. Of course, local government assists the smaller municipalities where they can. Unfortunately, the big municipalities have been left on their own, to their own devices, which is sometimes difficult. We've had some donation from the department as far as water tanks were concerned, where they've donated, I think, 320 or 330 water tanks that were erected in the informal settlements. The filling of those, of course, is then for the cost of Johannesburg Water. There has been talk of funds that were created where we could apply for these assistance, but to date, none of those have been awarded, or definitely not to the larger municipalities, I'm told. So yeah, that's problematic. There was another question on the Q&A which talked about water tanks or rainwater tanks, and what do we do about that? Water tanks is usually a good solution, except in South Africa we don't have consistent rain. In Johannesburg, we are a summer rainfall area. We normally get rain up until about March, if you're lucky, a little bit in April. And then it stops, and the next rain comes end of October, beginning of November. So if you're relying on a water tank or a rainwater tank, that is problematic, because you can't fill it in winter when it doesn't rain. But yes, of course, in summer it will make a difference, except we're not in summer right now. This is midwinter for us. I think communications was mentioned as well. Communications is very important for us. We have to get communities to assist and to reduce water. Unfortunately, we also have a different culture in some of our areas where people have a culture of non-payment. And if you don't pay for something, why bother to save it? So that's normally a problem, and especially now. So that pushes up on non-revenue waters as well. And then I mentioned before that non-revenue water is a big issue for us. And now it's increasing because we've reconnected all the illegal all the illegal users, and the non-payers as well. So non-revenue water is just shooting up as well.
Johan, here I want to give Sizani a chance to rebut your rebuttal. But I want to frame it a little bit differently, or put it in some context. We've got a question from the audience from David Bozeman regarding whether it's one of those inherent questions as people in the water sector need to ask: is water a social good or an economic commodity? And in the midst of a pandemic where hand washing is promoted as an important prevention step, it obviously feels, as David says, right and ethical to view it as a social good. And what Sizani has spoken to is national government support to that. And of course, here in South Africa, we've got things like free basic water and the like, pro-poor policies. But that there's a conundrum or an inherent conflict in that we have to finance our infrastructure off budget, or how do we go after that revenue? And can Sizani, I'd like to hear from you. And then it brings into the question, what is private sector investment? What role do they play in this? Is now a good time for private sector to engage, or are we seeing the existing triple Ps in the space struggling to adapt and cope with the force majeure of COVID-19? Sizani.
Yes, Peter. The water being a social good and an economic good, I would say definitely both. It is like that. We can't change it. It's a human right in terms of our constitution, and we cannot restrict water below a certain level according to the National Water Act and the Water Services Act. So, as you rightfully said, the free basic water is meant to be assisting. Now, when we come to private sector investment, I think this is one area where personally I feel conflicted about, because for now, I view the proposed public sector investment being loans into the infrastructure development, not necessarily the private sector saying, I am giving this particular asset, or I'm putting down this money for us to develop this asset that will help these people, whether we are calling it I forgot that other name, the nice to give things from companies. But most private sector proposed investments are loans. They would eventually say, how are we recouping our money back? And people are looking at generating profit or revenue out of it. And I'm not sure if that works for a country like ours, which is trying to promote economic growth. We are struggling with job creation. We are struggling with so many things. And then we would find those few that are looking at lining their pockets, if I can call it that. But on the other hand, there are few existing triple Ps which seems to be successful, even though they are loan based. They are successful and they are doing well. But again, as Johan made mention of the culture of non-payment, that is a big deal across the country, because no matter what good partnership you put in place, if that culture is not broken, or we teach people how to do things differently, we are struggling. We will forever struggle with the issue of improving the revenue collection. Now, again, that having to break that, it's really we could not break it with just a couple of workshops that we have had with people. So it may require a little bit more than just workshops and advertising for people to pay and all that. I don't know. It requires a deeper engagement. But then looking at the number of people that must be engaged with, I'm not even sure if that is sustainable. As again, those funds that are currently shifted from what is called soft functions to typical service provision. But if we are to engage with people on soft issues like paying their bills, that means we have to invest more on that other side and actually study the people on, do they really understand the difference between willingness to pay and the ability to pay? Because people just swing between the two as if it is one thing. Those who are able to pay, they are not willing, but then they will cry foul around affordability or ability to pay. And we don't have, neither from government or our utilities, we don't have a system that says, let me check your salary level for me to can say, are you able to pay or not? Somebody else might say, but that is infringement of human rights if you were to go to that level. So it's a matter of where do you draw the line? And I think Johan maybe might come in there and elaborate even more, because he's at the coalface of this challenge.
Before we come back to Johan, to avoid this being a two-way conversation, I do want to hear from William and Kelvin as to what their experience has been outside of South Africa. Are national governments or national treasuries stepping up to ensure that the financial losses are not fully borne on the utilities books, but also taken on as part of the national fiscus? And where obviously national fiscus is constrained, tax revenues are down across the board and unemployment up. That leads into another question I have, and that has come from the audience, about the role of the development finance institutions, the World Banks, the African Development Bank, et cetera. In our last Rock Blue lecture series session, we heard about work that was being done for the World Bank on setting up emergency financing mechanisms for COVID response in the water sector. Have you started to see any of that be made available in terms of emergency COVID response financing, longer-term sustainment of your operations, anything like that? William, Kelvin?
Okay. Now, I think let me first look at this issue of the social versus economic good. I think, yes, you are right, or we are right. Water is a social good with economic consequences, and by the way, very serious economic consequences. Now, outside South Africa, I got in touch with one country, I think this is Ghana. And for them during this pandemic, the president offered to waive all the water bills for the following 3 months immediately after the lockdown. So I think that was March, April, May, whatever, 3 months. So in those 3 months, all the citizens were going to get free water. Now, what did that mean? In actual fact, I think the state realized that in actual fact, there has been a very, very big scarcity of water because everyone wanted water. From that announcement, there was a huge demand for connections. There was a huge demand for water. That's when the state realized that in actual fact, they need to do a lot more to provide people with water. Of course, the question is, how was the state going to finance it? And that's what they are now dealing with. And now that there's a lot of demand for water and there's very little water available, the state is coming up with huge investments. Now, in my country here, Uganda, during this pandemic, that's when the government actually realized that water, especially institutions which have not paid, government institutions which are not paying, this is when the government has realized that now is the time for government to pay all its water bills. And as we talk, I think despite the fact that some people are not paying, private people, government has cleared all its water bills, which is very, very positive. I think without this pandemic, maybe this would not have been realized. Now, on third, the restructuring of utilities. Again, we are dealing with the making utilities efficient. I think this is a time that utilities are realizing that they have to undertake reforms. Reforms not only on the staffing side, but also on the operation side. You realize that, I think, as someone from South Africa was saying, now smart metering has started being introduced. People are looking at very efficient ways of providing water because the staff are few, and if they are few and service still has to be provided, we have to look at new technologies. So investments are now more demanding than ever before, and of course, efficient investments. Now, of course, how do we tackle the future? How do we get the money? I still say that private money going for a social good will still be a big problem. So I think your three PPs, as you are saying, still have to come into effect. We still need a lot of public funding to maybe augment the private funding that may be available. And I don't think we'll have in the next 5-6 years, I don't think we'll have a lot of private funding because now everyone realizes that water is so important. And therefore, if it is important, the state has to come in. And of course, the state cannot do everything. The private sector has to provide, play its role where it must be, and then leave the rest to an efficient state-run utility that can maybe mitigate some of these issues that are coming up.
Okay, I could come in. Has government been able to come in to bail out utilities? I think one of the issues that we were worried about was treatment chemicals, especially that we import all the treatment chemicals outside the country. And if the borders are closed, then that would be a problem. So one of the things that we've seen is government getting interested to see the quantities of chemicals that the utilities would need in a specific period and see how they can facilitate to have these chemicals come in. So you could see that obviously the government is concerned and they are trying to assist. But also in the last 1-2 months, we've also seen quite some resources given to the utility to just sustain them during this period, not to the quantum that would have loved to see because obviously of competing needs, but at least we've been able to see that happen. We've also seen some of the cooperating partners that have come in and said, look, can we assist you as a sector? Let each utility put up what is an emergency response plan and see how they can be assisted. And again, we coordinated those response plans from all the commercial utilities, and cooperating partners took those up, though we are yet to see the flow of resources to support the response plans. So you can see that everyone is saying, look, what can we do? Because this is an abnormal situation. Let me talk about the issue of private sector in the sector. I think the current arrangement, if you look, talking about private sector where they take over the all facilities in their present state and provide water, I don't see that happening for some time in future. But what I see is a private coming to say, look, there is a new establishment here, would want to get water from you and do infrastructure and supply this gated community, and will be able to bill and manage it. We've seen a number of people that have come to try and see if they can look at that model. So that, I think, is a possibility. We also have seen people coming to say, look, you've got a sewerage treatment plant. We think we could partner with you so that what is coming out of there can be used to produce biogas or electricity and be able to supply. So those are some of the models that we are seeing are possibilities. But taking over infrastructure in its current state and say, let's run it the way the utilities are running it, someone should be crazy to put in money looking at the level of investment that is needed, but also the state of infrastructure and the politics in water. We've also see where someone would come and say, look, this particular service, how much does it cost you? We think we can do it better and cheaper, give it to us, and then we'll be able to do it cheaper and then give you a return. Those are some of the private sector participation that I see. Otherwise, having a utility as a private to run everything, including the politics of water, that is yet to happen.